I'm Stephanie Hessler. I'm a high performance coach to high achieving, successful individuals and host of the weekly Success Mindset Live. And today we have a very special guest to help us tackle the important topic of how to manage overwhelm. And our guest is uniquely qualified to talk on the topic of overwhelm. I was actually poking around her website, and these words really, really jumped out at me. It said, if feeling frazzled, cluttered, and overwhelmed isn't your dream life, you're in the right place. She has multiple certifications, including certified life coach, professional organizer, clutter coach, home life expert, and she's also the host of A Pleasant Solution, Embracing an Organized Life podcast. And you're going to be amazed by how she juggles with such ease the different aspects of her life. Welcome today, Amelia Pleasant Kennedy.
It is an honor to be here. I'm so glad to connect with you, Stephanie, and of course, your audience to talk about overwhelm.
It's such an important topic, especially at this time of the year. And Amelia, for the individuals in my audience who may not know you yet very well, please tell us more about your background and what it is that you're doing.
Yes. Well, the reason that Stephanie and I are connected is because I'm a Wellesley alum, and I spent a good number of years at home raising my children. And when I decided to pursue a career, organization came naturally to me. So I started an in-home organizing business and worked with women and families to eliminate clutter. Yet what really sparked my interest was I was seeing layers of mental clutter, what I call it, emotional clutter that was kind of floating underneath. We often think that it is the external objects in our home that are causing us to spin in circles or creating that level of pressure or anxiety, but oftentimes it's the layer of beliefs that we have where we're judging ourselves for being a good partner, being a good parent, being a good professional. We're looking around and saying, I'm not able to keep up. And so many other people out there are, and that comparison can really steal our joy. So I became a life coach because I was interested in listening, because I was interested in exploring some of those deeper layers about what it means to care for a home and, of course, have a high-powered career.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, I wrote that down, mental clutter. That's not, we tend to think about clutter in terms of our material goods, right? But I think you're really onto something. There is so much mental clutter. And so how does that then tie in with overwhelm? What is overwhelm and what causes overwhelm?
Yes. So overwhelm is an emotion. It's an experience that we're having often because of mental clutter. We've got our to-do lists. We are trying to keep track of lots of information. We have certain expectations of ourselves. And what overwhelm is, what I often see is it's a sense of powerlessness.
Mm.
There's too much to do and not enough time. And it's often partnered with confusion, which we're all familiar with, thinking that we don't know where to start on a particular project or task. And then we kind of get shut down from overwhelm. It's an emotion that doesn't really lead to taking action. It's more of that kind of staying stuck, thinking, going in circles. And often what results is that negative inner self-talk. We're all familiar with that. That amplifies the feeling of overwhelm when the voice inside of our head, says, "Oh, I don't know where to start," or "It's too much. I can't get to this. There's not enough time. Not enough help" is often another one. But yeah, it's a feeling that is often caused by past choices.
Mm.
So we're prone to overcommitting. So we take on too much that for the time that we have available. And again, directly related to our thinking, it's that we're not always trusting that we can solve the issue at hand or have the power to say, "No, thank you. I've got too much on my plate," and drop it altogether.
Right, right. So I love how you've identified it as it's an emotion, and that sense of powerlessness, too much, overcommitted, not enough time, causes people to shut down, going around in circles. Who's most at risk for overwhelm?
Yes, I first want to just be clear. I often work with folks who have an ADHD brain. So if that is you, just know for sure, that brain chemistry often cycles through underwhelm, then hyper focusing, overcommitting, which leads to overwhelm. So if you are living with ADHD, that might sound very familiar. Other folks who have perfectionist tendencies often experience overwhelm. So we're not understanding that we can lower our standards and expectations. We often get stuck thinking that it has to be the best all the time. And if it can't be the best, why try? And it's a natural desire. We all want it to get it right and to do it well, but that can lead to overwhelm because we kind of get stuck thinking that there's a right way. And lastly, I'll say, if you're someone with looser boundaries with regards to your time or attention, overwhelm is also very common there because you haven't practiced perhaps saying no or blocking off time in your calendar to re-energize or rest up to alleviate that overwhelm. So I don't want to, it is an emotion that we often don't feel in control of, but I want to just offer that it starts with just awareness first and kindness and self-compassion that end up being some of the tools and solutions to get out of overwhelm. So just because we're in it doesn't mean we can't get out with a little bit of a pause.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what you were describing as, who's at most at risk, it sounds like the kinds of people I work with as well. High achieving individuals tend to be perfectionists, want to do things the right way, do it 100%, overcommit, not say no, right? And so what do you do to help overwhelm people? How do you actually help them?
Yeah, and the tips that I really want to offer start with that idea of the relationship between overwhelm and mental clutter. We often think that we can hold everything in our brain and we're using our working memory to remember to-dos or obligations that we might feel that we need to meet. So step one is to get it all out of your brain and really to write down all the things you're thinking about, whether they're minor or major, and just dump them out onto paper, digitally, however works best for you. And keep asking yourself, what else? Until you feel like you really can't think of anything else. I encourage folks to be realistic about the current season of life that they're in, right? We're in the holiday season, so things might be special or particular to this time of year, whereas fresh into the new year, you might have a different set of goals or sense.
Mm-hmm.
I encourage people to really think about the opportunity cost to your time choices. So when we talk about overwhelm and we're always saying yes or feel obligated, whether we're doing the thing or not doing the thing, there's always an opportunity cost of all the other things we could be doing with our time and energy. And of course, there's always emotions related to that. Then I'll say we talk about prioritization, but really prioritizing based on the filter that feels most aligned for this season of life. So that might be personal, it might be work, it might be family, it might be finances. Listen to your heart as much as you listen to your brain, because sometimes we ignore that inner intuition that says I'm at max capacity right now.
Right.
And then we're going to break the project down. Lastly, is kind of breaking something down that feels overwhelming into the smallest parts that feel achievable, because we need to assess the amount of time that we have, get it on the schedule, and then check in to see if we can realistically accomplish that goal or project, or if we need to scale it a bit for the time given. And lastly, I always want to say, like, plan a celebration or reward whenever you make it out of overwhelm, and get started, right? That first 5 minutes, give yourself a pat on the back for making that change, because our brains, they love a little knowing that we've been successful, and reward for that time and effort.
Oh, absolutely. And I've been taking copious notes here as you shared these. I think it was 5 or 6 tips. And Amelia, I love how you're also giving this the context of this season of life, right? Because if you're working full time and you have young children, that's a different season than, like, for me, my kids are young adults, they're out of the house, right? So that is so important as well. Yeah. And I'd be curious if you might share with our audience, so what would be considered a successful outcome? Could you possibly share like a client story of a successful outcome?
For sure. And I always want to say, kind of preface that in coaching, in these conversations, the successful outcome is really defined by the client and their particular individual goals. So for some of my clients, that's less physical clutter, mental clutter, or scheduling clutter, better personal boundaries, or less people pleasing. Sharing the chore load within the home. I'm a member of the sandwich generation, also caring for my mother who's living with dementia. So it's important to know when we can share responsibilities with other folks that we're living with. And one particular client that I will highlight, she had lost both her grandmother and her father within a few weeks of one another. And she was tasked with the responsibility of taking on their belongings, decluttering, sorting, and figuring out what to do with them. And as you can imagine, not only the grief, the emotion, the loss, but the need to handle all of the objects. So when we talk about overwhelm, that's an example of trying to show up for yourself each day while having this kind of big project and emotions looming. So steadily over 6 months, we helped together, we untangled the emotion, because that's really a big part of it, and understanding aspects of it we can control, allowing the grief, allowing the sadness, because you have to kind of make way to be able to make conscious decisions about what to do with items. So when we talk about overwhelm, right, we want to think about that combination of emotions and decisions. And ultimately, we worked towards building a bit of self-trust in her, deep self-trust, that she could handle both the emotions and the decisions and let go of the objects and keep the ones that were most meaningful for her. And she came up with some really creative projects of ways to honor their memory, but not keep all of the items in her home.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, as I'm hearing you talk about this, it's making me also realize that, this requires your clients to really have a lot of trust in you, right? Because they're opening up their inner worlds, their grief experiences, traumas. I mean, although that kind of mental activity that can block us, right? So I'm just imagining that you must be someone who's very sensitive and empathic to be able to draw this out of your clients.
Thank you. Yeah, it is very important for me to create a safe container, one that is, the client feels held in confidentiality, that they feel that I will be honest with them, but
Right.
also support them and be their cheerleader, of course, as they go through this difficult time.
Yeah. And so I'm thinking particularly of like clutter at home and I love how you've made it clear there are these different types of
Mhm.
clutter. Physical clutter is just one type of clutter, right? So how does that clutter at home contribute to overwhelm? And then what about clutter at work?
Yes, these are really important areas. And I first want to say that just the definition of clutter is any unwanted or unused object, right? Like there are things in your home that you love and you want and you use, and they earn their keep.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's everything else. So that's the
Right.
clutter. And what we don't realize is that visual clutter, so too many objects in our space, actually raises our cortisol levels. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the stress.
Mm-hmm.
And we need a recovery period on a daily basis. When our stress levels go high, we need a bit of a break from that. And so when there are too many objects, and that's determined by the client, right? Everybody's home, their work space, their threshold is different.
Right.
When there's too many objects in the space, that's happening in the background, the raising of the stress levels. And we don't realize often how frequently our brain is categorizing as well. So if you've ever heard it's a very quiet voice in the back of your head that says, oh, that pile, I need
Right.
to pile those papers, right? I need to put those shoes back in the closet, right? All of that in the background is draining our energy. So whether it's at home
Yeah.
or it's at work, we're taking that information in, we're processing it, and then we have our internal judgment about it. And so
Yes.
all of that kind of works together to raise those
Yeah.
stress
Yeah.
levels. And of course, it impacts our relationship with our partners, our coworkers, ourself as well.
Absolutely.
Be
Yeah.
careful.
Yeah. You bring up a good point because it's very subtle, but that
Mhm.
voice is playing, and you're right. It can take a lot of energy playing.
And that is the one thing I think clients are most surprised to learn when they get to the other side of their clutter journey,
Mm,
is that they don't feel that low buzzing or hum or drain that we all grow used to.
right. 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 Yeah. And I'm just curious particularly on the physical declutter, do you go into someone's home? What's your process?
So I do not anymore. The first couple of years of my business, I did a lot of in-home organizing. Now I work only virtually and typically for 6 months or more at a time. So because I have the skills to organize someone's home, we can do that in a virtual format, which often makes the client feel a little bit more comfortable because they get to manage the pace. They get to show me how much or little of a space that they want to see. And it really is to the client's advantage in the virtual format because we all learn in a different way. And part of transferring the skills and the knowledge when we work virtually, it's listening to the directions, it's processing, it's asking questions, it's talking through. But then the kinesthetic process of doing the actual decluttering or organizing really helps the client learn those skills and embody what makes sense for them. Because no matter what you see on social media or the internet, an organized home looks different for everyone. So it's finding what makes sense to that particular client and their home.
Yeah. 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 And that ties back in what you said earlier, not that judgmental, not comparing yourself to others, right? We're each our own unique expression. Yeah. And so, given that this is kind of a potentially busy and hectic season, the month of December, do you have any particular tips or suggestions that you might give our audience for navigating this month, the year end?
For sure. When you get off this live, I encourage you to actively block off some time for yourself, some alone time, some downtime, because this is I like to call it the giving season. We're not just giving gifts, but we're giving our time, our energy, and attention to all of the things. And we know that a break is ahead, perhaps some time off of work. But unless you give a defined block to yourself to read, take a walk, rest, purposefully connect with a loved one or someone else, that time can easily evaporate. So use your scheduling and planning tools for your free time as well.
Yeah.
When it comes to that gift giving, I made a video the other day just reminding folks that we think it's about the object, the gift, but as a clutter professional, I encourage you to think more about the acknowledgement and the appreciation. That's really what your coworkers or your service providers or your loved ones want, because that object is just going to possibly become clutter that they have to handle later on down the line. So a nice note or a donation made in someone's honor is equally as valuable, just kind of highlighting their importance in your life.
Oh, I love how you're stressing that second point in particular. I mean, one, I agree. I think that alone time is essential. I encourage my clients to have a daily morning mindset practice before they bring the world in, to get grounded in self. And for a lot of people, that's new, right? So the alone time is so important. And you're right about the gift giving. That it's really about the meaning, right? And your comment about it might just add to somebody's clutter is a very important point. So any final ideas as we wrap up? Any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, I'll share two. One, the objects, the clutter in your home, on your desk, estate planning, digital clutter, all of it will wait for you. And just remember, it's easy to put off and say, when I have more time or later, I'll make those hard decisions or do that emotional work. But just to be clear, it will wait. It's very patient, and it's actually us. We are the ones with the emotions that have to kind of get to the place where we can get started. And the second thing I will share is really to believe that you or lean into the fact that everyone on this call is more organized than they think. So look for what's working in your life, your home,
Yes.
and just take a moment, especially during the holiday season, to celebrate yourself and the things that are working in your favor in terms of productivity or home life. Celebrate yourself as well.
Yes. Yes. Oh, those are wonderful tips. And I love how so much of what you're saying really does take each individual back to self, right? Because probably most people in your audience, in my audience, are very generous with their time for others. Well, Amelia, it has been just so enlightening for me, and I know for those listening, to have you here today. What a wonderful expertise you have. And that, I can just imagine that there are a lot of people out there who can benefit from what you know and how you can help them. If my listeners would like to contact you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yes. Well, thank you. I appreciate your kind words. Clutter coaching is something that I sort of made as an amalgamation of a variety of skills, and it is very impactful. And I love when people identify that there might be a deeper layer underneath their physical clutter. So my business name is A Pleasant Solution. And you can find me on all of the platforms in that way. So Instagram, Facebook, A Pleasant Solution. My website is A Pleasant Solution. I offer monthly workshops for the public, so you're welcome to join me there. I also have a podcast called A Pleasant Solution,
Right.
Embracing an
Very
Organized
good.
Life. So I just tried to make it simple in all the places.
Yeah, great. And we'll post here the link where people can find you. And you had mentioned a few minutes ago you have a new video. Where can people find videos? Do you have them on your website, or where would those be?
Yes, primarily on social media, on Instagram or Facebook. And then I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Good, good, good. And you've got the monthly workshop. So I definitely encourage those who are interested to contact you. Amelia, I want to thank you again for being here, for sharing your expertise and your time with me. And then for all of those in the audience, remember that you are exceptional. It's a matter of allowing it to come to the surface. So thank you again, Amelia. Thank you to all of you listeners, and we'll see you again next week. Bye for now. I'm Stephanie Hessler. Bye-bye.